Thank you very much for joining us on our midweek business news report. We now start off with a feature on the show today as we look at the global economy, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and how this is also affecting Nigeria today. Now, Russia-Ukraine conflict has so far resulted in a rift in global fertilizer supply chains, with both countries moving to suspend their fertilizer exports as well as wheat, inevitably putting upward pressure on China's potash fertilizer market that remains reliant on imported potash. Now, from wheat to barley and copper to nickel, analysis of the situation points that supply chains is set to be further disrupted as the crisis takes a turn for the worse. Ukraine is considered the breadbasket of Europe, and Ukraine produces wheat, barley and rye that much of Europe relies on. Now, it's also a big producer of corn. In fact, it's not just the European Union that is hit hard. Many nations in the Middle East and Africa also rely heavily on Ukrainian wheat and corn, and disruptions to that supply is greatly affecting food security in these regions. Now, wheat and corn prices are already soaring. Wheat futures traded in Chicago have also jumped about 12% since the start of this year, while corn futures spiked 14.5% in the same period. Now, food inflation has been rising and could also worsen if an armed conflict erupts further. And rising food prices would only be exacerbated with an additional price shock, especially if core agricultural areas in Ukraine are seized by Russian loyalists. Well, joining me now for more on this discussion, looking at the global impact of the shock and how it affects Nigeria's food base, I have agribusiness coach and former representatives and agri sector representatives of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, African farmer Mogaji. Thank you very much for joining us on the Breakfast Show this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Now, looking at the fact that Russia remains one of the top exporter of wheat, looking at also that of Ukraine, cumulatively both is a sum of about 30%. Hence, there's a huge market here. And this crisis continues to tighten the news around how other economies that heavily rely on these sustain themselves, looking at the production of bread, noodles, pasta, cake, and others. We are likely going to see a very big impact here in Nigeria because we heavily rely on wheat from Russia here in the country. So it's, for so many, it's going to be expensive to look for any alternative at this point in time. How do you see things playing out in the coming days?
Well, it's going to be tough for the importers because first and foremost, it's their economy that is affected because they sell or they buy and process into other products. So first and foremost, they will be badly hit. And secondly is the consumer. So they have a challenge now. The challenge is at least they still have some reserves. Beyond the reserves, maybe we'll get to that later, power, which is diesel. So right now they have to increase. So it's not looking good because the world trades together and everybody works on their comparative advantage. So nobody really wants to compete with Russia and Ukraine before. But right now, they have to look elsewhere, and looking elsewhere in the short term won't work. It has to be something long term. So for consumers now, we should just belt up to reduce. Obviously, people will reduce intakes of some of these products, but wheat affects our daily living.
Definitely.
Pasta, noodles, name it. Even the livestock, there's what is called the wheat bran, which is the waste, from the wheat. So it's not looking good anytime soon at all.
And we also had the report from the National Bureau of Statistics highlighting the inflation report for the month of February. We're still seeing that we're dealing with double-digit inflationary pressures. Now, how do you see this Russia-Ukraine crisis also exacerbates this pressure that we're going to see? Because, yes, government is trying as much as possible to ensure that we bring these figures down, irrespective of what the market reality also says is going on. But from a food perspective now, in terms of the pressure, how intense will it be for Nigeria today and government helping to manage this? Because when you look at food inflation, one of the major increases we see is in bread and in cereals.
Yeah, so I actually don't see how government can help.
Because it's an external shock beyond our control. It's an
external shock. Everybody's not exporting again, When you talk about wheat, it requires some measure of cold at a certain stage of growth. So bottom line is Europe and some part of US that produce this product. So they also don't have enough. And so right now, everybody is holding what they have. So government can't do anything. It's just our taste, our preference for some of those foods will change. That's just what can happen right now.
And with the FAO also, the Food and Agriculture Organization also talking about how the price movement has been a bushel of wheat about 5.7% up now at this point in time. And they're painting two narratives now for most countries heavily reliant on imports from either Ukraine or Russia in terms of wheat and other commodities. We have to either look at investing in the short term, as quickly as possible, critical infrastructure in states where they have comparative advantages to support wheat production, or we have to look elsewhere from Russia and Ukraine. How do you now see these two options playing out in a best and worst case scenario? I know you've made mention of the fact that there's no magic wand we can wait around at this point in time.
Yeah. So first thing first is wheat is produced towards dry season. Most of the varieties is produced towards dry season so that it meets the cool weather. So what that means is that majority of the varieties, you can't rush to say the rains have come to go and plant. You still have to wait towards the end of the year. And that happens globally. So what that means is that we can't do anything except we have it in storage. However, the Russia-Ukraine challenge helps with us looking inward. We have to now look at our wheat. We have wheat varieties. How can we develop our wheat varieties such that the wheat, we use what we have as against focusing on what we don't have? The wheat varieties that we bring into the country, don't forget, some people worked on it, sold the idea to us, and we're using it. We have wheat varieties. We can grow wheat. We don't have a major comparative advantage, but we can further develop our cassava flour. Don't forget, a few years ago, we were really heavy on that, but it was stalled. But right now, what government can do, then government was trying to force cassava flour to the wheat processors to include in their flour mixture. Right now, the processors are open because they don't have a choice again. They will be open to funding the research that can be done very fast for that inclusion, or probably moving into the cassava flour. We can have that and use that. It's just that we've not done the research, we've not invested heavily in that. So right now, it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity.
And do you think this would also force the hand of government and also stakeholders within the sector to now wake up, smell the coffee, and have these serious conversations that we ought to, or we've been dilly-dallying? All of these we are saying now are not necessarily new. We've had these conversations year in, year out, and it just seems like the body language is one of is a nonchalant attitude really to the reality on ground now. So how do you see this also playing out in terms of government's agenda for positioning agriculture as a mainstay, for taking it much more seriously for what it is, for ensuring that we can feed the nation irrespective of what plays out on the international market? We must eat, we must feed, and we can't continue paying expensive prices for that.
I think we are putting too much pressure on government to deliver. My personal
now takes the fault.
So you see, over the years, what plays out is that government finds it difficult to adequately plan and project. That's the trend. It's the private sector that should take the responsibility and lobby government, to support. We have been used to government, and the dynamics have not changed.
Mr. Mokaji, now, under your service within the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, you've had interactions with a whole lot of individuals, be it agriculture and a whole lot, just within the agriculture space, different sectors, value chains. You've had a whole lot of discussions, and you've also seen how much these individuals are pushing just to get the ear of government, and sometimes it falls on deaf ears. You've had your own first-hand experiences. So how do you now see them forcing the hand of government beyond the regular calls and press conferences and conversations within the corridors of power?
So one of the main challenges that we don't speak the language of the government.
Okay.
We don't speak their language. Until you speak their language, you can't lobby them or turn their hand.
Then what's the language of government?
So when I was chairman at Greek at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we brought in for the first time all Southwest Commissioners of Agriculture. And what did we ask them to do? Pitch 2 projects, one for the institutional investors and one for the working class professional that they can put money in. And in 30 days to 60 days, you can get investors and the institutional investors in 6 months. And they all came. That was May 30, 2020. COVID, they all showed up, pitched. You see, when we want to talk to government, we don't talk to government in the area in which they are focusing on. We want to push our project. Can we pitch to them what they are interested in? This is campaign year. They listen more campaign year.
But don't you think that there are blind spots in the economic agenda of the government? Hence, that's why we have the private sector also pushing these other topical issues.
Yes. So a major challenge with government across board is that you don't have square pegs and square holes. You have the wrong person in the office all the time, especially in the Ministry of Agriculture. Apart from Dr. Adeshino and the minister under President Olusegun Obasanjo, we've not had other ministers perform. Now they brought in another good person last minute, but we'll be expecting a miracle from the person, but it's still delivering. What we don't do is that we don't put Minister for Health, we put a professional there. We always bring anybody to head the Ministry of Agriculture. And yet, we're talking about non-oil export, diversification. We never put the right people. Minister of State, there was a particular year within the last few years, the Minister of State was a PhD law in agric. So bottom line is that until you put the right people there, you will not get results.
Let's talk about getting results now. At the end of the day, with this whole crisis we've seen here between Russia and Ukraine, we've had the global impact on fuel scarcity, jet fuel, and then also petrol and a whole lot more. Now, we're also seeing that the average agribusiness player is finding things much more difficult. Now, your access to your raw materials is stifled. Insecurity continues to threaten your farms and your network of individuals who work for you. And now the latest we have is the power situation. Erratic, epileptic power supply, which does not support the average business that deals either in cold rooms or storage of the processes. And with all of the vegetables and other items we have, the shelf life is really short. We've not built our capacity in terms of transportation within that regard, or even alternative on-grid, off-grid power solutions. Everybody has to rely on generators. Fuel scarcity still lingers on here and there. How do you see these businesses managing?
See,
they don't die a natural death.
Ukraine-Russia war is an opportunity for Nigeria. It's war to them, it's opportunity to Nigeria. Bottom line is that we need policy change. We need our leaders. I was saying on the platform, we need the Minister for Trade and Investment, Foreign Minister, to now begin to say, hey, Nigeria is open to European investment in agriculture because everybody is running away from Russia now. So we need the ministers to begin to talk big. Let them begin to tell them what we have, the ease of doing business, where we were, where we are now. We need to do a lot of promotion. We need the Minister of Trade and Investment sitting here right now. Talking to the people. We need the Foreign Minister sitting here talking to the people. If I were to choose between becoming a Minister of Agriculture and becoming Minister for Youth and Development, I would choose Minister for Youth and Development. Because right now, Nigeria and Africa has it the best with this war. Now they would look outward and they will look to African countries they have relationships with. So bottom line is that we can create jobs for our youths. The private sector can put in more money. The working class professional can put in more money. Little can government do. Government should just be talking and saying what is available. How many dams do we have? How many irrigations do we have? But bottom line, this war affecting even the agri sector now is an opportunity for people to turn things around. It's biting hard, but guess what? a lot of money is to be made also.
Well, opportunity meets preparedness is the only way we can have any change. You're also looking at disruptions to the natural gas supply, which in turn would also affect production of fertilizer. Nigeria is also yet to put its house in order in terms of that. So we still really have a whole lot of work to do, and we hope government takes seriously all of these cues. Thank you very much for your time on the Breakfast Show this morning, African Farmer Mokachi.